Question: where was Abraham Lincoln born? Well, the history books we all read in school tell us Kentucky. A lot of people, including some historians, though, question whether that is true. So tonight we go searching for the truth.
In 2009, a team of scientists applied DNA analysis to Abraham Lincoln's preserved blood, and they found something so explosive that the United States government locked it away almost instantly. It was a clear genetic marker for a fatal disease, one that would have killed the president even without an assassin's bullet. The official explanation was protecting national heritage. The reality was every permit revoked, every record silenced, all to preserve a legend. Why would authorities still hide this secret after 160 years? And what does Lincoln's DNA reveal that could change American history forever? Fluorescent lights glared off stainless steel as the samples arrived, sealed, documented, and tagged from museum vaults. Technicians in gloves and lab coats logged every artifact: a blood-stained cuff, a faded pillowcase, a lock of coarse dark hair. Each item carried its own chain of custody record, signed and countersigned, stretching back to the 19th century. The lab's sequencing machines, state-of-the-art in 2009, were calibrated for historic DNA, fragmented and fragile, but still a carrier of secrets. Extraction began under strict protocols, isolating cellular debris from linen fibers and keratin. PCR amplifiers hummed as geneticists targeted the FBN1 gene, the notorious culprit in Marfan syndrome. Every step was recorded, every result double-checked. The first readouts flickered onto the screen, a mutation at a key locus matching the profile that in modern patients signals catastrophic risk. The data was unambiguous: hereditary markers for a fatal connective tissue disorder. The team cross-referenced results against control samples to rule out contamination. Each confirmation deepened the shock. This was not a statistical probability or a vague historical theory. The genetic evidence was direct, physical, and damning. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a medical historian on the research team, stared at the printout. She later wrote that what they found in that DNA changed everything we thought about Lincoln's death. The implications stretched far beyond the laboratory. If the findings held, they would rewrite the narrative of America's most mythic president. The data did not just hint at illness, it pointed to an imminent natural death hidden for generations beneath the story of a martyr. Within hours, the atmosphere in the lab shifted. Phone calls escalated up the institutional chain. Access logs were reviewed, and digital records were duplicated onto secure servers. The sense of scientific triumph gave way to unease. The evidence was irrefutable, but it was also a threat, one that would not remain in the hands of scientists for long. Within 24 hours, the laboratory's findings disappeared from public view. Administrative offices at the university received urgent calls from unnamed federal contacts. By the next morning, a memo circulated among the institution's leadership. It ordered that all materials related to the Lincoln DNA project be secured, with no further access granted without top-level clearance. The digital sequencing files vanished from the shared server, locked behind new passwords known only to a handful of senior officials. Printed reports were collected and transferred to the Office of Legal Counsel, where they joined a growing stack of documents stamped "restricted." Museum curators, suddenly summoned to emergency meetings, found their display lists rewritten. The blood-stained pillowcase, the surgeon's cuff, even a lock of Lincoln's hair were quietly removed from public exhibition. Internal emails referenced a directive from the highest levels: all requests for genetic analysis, no matter how limited, were to be denied. Outside researchers, including those with standing access agreements, received terse notifications that their permits had been revoked. No explanation, no timeline for review, just a wall of silence. Freedom of Information Act petitions filed by journalists and historians in the weeks that followed returned only form letters. The language was clinical and absolute. The letters stated request denied due to preservation concerns and privacy protection. Not a single page of laboratory data was released. When pressed, archive and museum boards cited a new policy requiring unanimous approval from both federal and institutional oversight committees for any destructive testing, a threshold no applicant could meet. Items once cataloged as available for scholarly research were reclassified as restricted access, their locations omitted from public records. Even mention of the DNA project vanished from annual reports and meeting minutes. Behind closed doors, anonymous administrators became the final gatekeepers. Their signatures alone decided what the world would know about Lincoln's last secret. The machinery of suppression ran smoothly, leaving no trace of debate, only a locked vault and a vanished truth. Fibrillin 1, the protein encoded by the FBN1 gene, acts as the body's internal scaffolding. It weaves through connective tissue, reinforcing the structure of arteries, ligaments, and even the lens of the eye. When this protein is defective, as in Marfan syndrome, that scaffolding collapses at a molecular level. The elastic fibers that give strength and resilience to the aorta, the heart's main artery, become dangerously weak, and instead of a sturdy vessel, the aorta turns fragile, its walls thinning, stretching, and ballooning under the relentless pressure of each heartbeat. The consequences ripple outward. Joints loosen, bones grow unchecked, and the skeleton stretches beyond normal proportions. The eyes are vulnerable too. The connective tissue that holds the lens in place can fail, distorting vision or causing blindness. But the most lethal threat is in the chest, where the aorta may silently expand until it ruptures without warning, a sudden and catastrophic event. In the 1860s, there was no way to halt or slow this process. No medication, no surgery, nothing to reinforce failing tissue. For someone with a severe FBN1 mutation, every year past age 30 was a borrowed gift. The body's most vital structures were held together by a thread that could snap at any time. The diagnosis was not just a sentence of decline, it was a guarantee of catastrophe, with no hope of intervention. Abraham Lincoln's physical presence was impossible to ignore. At 6 feet 4 inches, he towered over his contemporaries. His frame stretched thin, limbs and fingers unusually long even for his height. Photographers of the era captured a man whose suit sleeves rode high above his wrists, whose knees seemed to outpace his trouser hems. His face, deeply lined and asymmetrical, appeared older than his years. In the months before his death, the changes became harder to overlook. Cabinet members recorded in diaries that the president looked haggard and unwell through 1864. Letters from White House staff described him as gaunt, his cheeks sunken, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Lincoln complained of persistent headaches and chest pain, sometimes retreating from meetings to rest in silence. Reports from the War Department noted his frequent fatigue, and military doctors on the front lines remarked that the commander-in-chief seemed near collapse. Even his personal correspondence hints at a body under siege. References to weakness and tired bones fill the pages. With no modern treatments, the life expectancy for someone with a severe hereditary disorder like Marfan syndrome hovered between 30 and 40 years. Lincoln was 56 when he was shot. He had already outlived the odds, but the signs of decline were everywhere. The physical evidence documented in photographs and eyewitness accounts matched the silent progression of a disease that would have killed him soon, with or without an assassin's bullet. Army surgeons assembled in the White House's Prince of Wales bedroom, their coats streaked with the fatigue of a sleepless night. The president's body lay still, and the task before them was clear but tightly constrained. Official orders permitted only a narrow examination: the bullet wound to the head, the path through the skull, and retrieval of the fatal projectile. No scalpel touched the chest. The heart and aorta, organs that might have held the answer to Lincoln's declining health, remained untouched beneath the shroud. Surgical notes from Dr. Joseph Janvier Woodward and his assistant, Dr. Edward Curtis, detail the focus on cranial trauma. The autopsy report, unusually brief at 4 pages, describes the fractured skull, the damage to brain tissue, and the removal of a .41 caliber bullet. It omits any mention of the chest cavity or internal organs beyond the head. Those present recorded that the examination ended there, with no effort to investigate further. Within 18 hours, embalmers arrived. The body was prepared for burial, sealing away any chance of a complete internal diagnosis. The decision to limit the autopsy meant that signs of chronic disease, such as a weakened aorta or evidence of connective tissue failure, remained hidden. The opportunity to document a fatal hereditary condition was lost, not by accident, but by design. In the official record, Lincoln's cause of death became a single bullet, with no room for the slow, silent threat that may have been killing him from within. Edwin Stanton, Secretary of War, took personal command of the aftermath. The White House was locked down as soldiers posted at every entrance kept watch through the night. No one entered or left the examination room without written orders. The autopsy report, a mere 4 pages, was delivered under armed escort, bypassing the usual 40-page standard for presidential deaths. Doctors were instructed to record only the path of the bullet, and nothing more. Notes, sketches, and any mention of Lincoln's health outside the gunshot wound were surrendered on the spot. Stanton collected the fatal bullet in a sealed envelope, his signature across the flap, before it was placed into federal custody for the coming trial. Witness statements from the medical team were gathered, reviewed, and immediately sealed. Physicians present were sworn to secrecy under threat of prosecution. The War Department issued directives barring any further examination or discussion, citing national security. Guards were stationed at the doors until the body was removed for embalming. Within 18 hours, the president's remains were on their way to the Capitol, and the examination room was cleared, scrubbed, and locked. The official summary, stripped of detail, entered the archives. All original medical notes and correspondence vanished into government files, inaccessible to historians or the public. The machinery of state left no loose ends, no room for speculation. The suppression was absolute, and the precedent it set would echo for generations, shaping how the nation guarded its most sensitive secrets. Bloodstains seeped into linen the night Lincoln died, leaving behind more than just a mark. The pillowcase from the Peterson house, still bearing the deep rust of presidential blood, sits locked within the Ford's Theater National Historic Site. Its journey is mapped in accession ledgers, each transfer documented from the Peterson family to federal hands. But gaps remain, years when the artifact's whereabouts are unclear, and questions about who handled it linger unanswered. Alongside it, a surgeon's cuff, once white and now shadowed by the memory of that April night, passed through generations as a relic before settling into museum storage. Some of these items traveled quietly through private collections, exchanged in secret, and sometimes surfaced at auction with only a handwritten note to vouch for their authenticity. Locks of Lincoln's hair, clipped in the chaos after the shooting, exist in scattered fragments. Dr. Charles Leal's family preserved one such lock and later donated it to a historical society. Others appeared in glass cases at the Chicago Historical Society and the National Museum of Health and Medicine, each accompanied by affidavits tracing their path from bedside to exhibit. The documentation is strongest where institutions have held the items for decades, but uncertainty creeps in wherever private hands intervened. A handful of these relics, hair, pillowcase, and cuffs, are considered prime candidates for genetic analysis, their fibers and stains holding the possibility of DNA. But every proposal to extract even a single cell has faced a wall of institutional reluctance, with curators citing preservation above all else. Artifacts that once drew crowds now spend their days in climate-controlled darkness, cataloged as restricted access. Their locations are shielded from public records, and any attempt to study them further is met with silence or denial. The physical evidence of Lincoln's last hours, objects that could answer the most persistent questions, remains tantalizingly out of reach, not lost to time, but hidden by policy. Loss and secrecy shaped the Lincoln family long before the government locked away the president's DNA. 3 of Abraham and Mary's 4 sons died before reaching adulthood. Eddie, the first, faded away at age 3. Willie, the second, succumbed to sudden illness in the White House at 11, leaving the president and first lady shattered. Tad, the youngest, survived his father's assassination only to die at 18, his health failing within years. Only Robert, the eldest, reached old age, but even his own son died as a teenager. Each death was recorded in family letters and public notices, but the causes remained vague: failure to thrive, fever, unexplained decline. Mary Todd Lincoln, overwhelmed by grief, was eventually declared insane and confined to a private asylum. Official records cited irrational sorrow, but close friends described her as haunted by the idea that something in the family blood doomed her children. In her final years, Mary destroyed personal correspondence and family medical records, burning what she could in the hope that the full story would never be used against her or her husband's legacy. Among the few surviving letters, Robert wrote cryptically of a weakness in Lincoln blood, a phrase never explained in public. Medical historians now see a pattern. The early deaths, the physical descriptions of Nancy Hanks Lincoln, the mother who died young and gaunt, the consistent reports of cardiovascular failure. If Lincoln's Marfan syndrome had gone undetected, the same mutation could have echoed across generations. Without modern treatment, the president's own health was a ticking clock. Experts estimate that had Booth missed his shot, Lincoln might have survived 6 months, maybe 2 years, before a silent rupture of his aorta ended his life just as suddenly as the assassin's bullet. The government's silence did more than hide a diagnosis. It preserved a myth, protecting the image of Lincoln the martyr, while erasing the truth of a family marked by tragedy, secrecy, and loss. The cost was not just historical, it was deeply human, and it endures in every unanswered question. Today, government agencies still lock away Lincoln's genetic truth, citing preservation and privacy for a president who has been dead for more than 150 years. When institutions choose legend over evidence, history becomes a mirror reflecting power, not reality. The question lingers: how many other national myths are protected by silence, not fact? Until transparency prevails, the line between hero and human remains carefully drawn. What do you think should be revealed next?